Okay,
Okay, I'm gonna call this special open work session for the budget to order at 6:17 p.m. on June 16th, 2022. Can I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Work session items, fiscal year 23 budget update presentation.
okay, so good evening, everybody. This is that time of year where we get to go through the budget that the district is presenting to the board for the fiscal year 23. Up until now, I've shown variations of this budget incrementally starting in February, so that by now, when you see the numbers that I present to you, there won't be any big shifts or changes or shocks from what you've previously seen. So with that, I will share my screen and get to it. All right, so starting with the TIFs, these are the TIFs that we currently have on the books in both Maplewood and Richmond Heights. Not much to discuss here other than we do have one that will be falling off relatively soon in the grand scheme of things anyway, and as it relates to TIFs being as long as they are. Okay, property taxes, we made just a few adjustments. Of course, we won't get final numbers from the Board of Equalization on new construction until July, which is after we've already approved the budget. So that's always interesting how that works. And of course, we won't set our tax rates until late September. But as of right now, these are what we're projecting. New construction and improvements in personal property are the only growth that we can realize, as this is a non-assessment year or a year of non-assessment. So only those improvements or properties or personal property that have come on the tax roll since January are eligible to be added to the AV. And of course, we're still limited by growth 5% or CPI. CPI just happens to be pretty high this year, so that will be the 5%. So these are the numbers for the operational side of the budget, right around 15.1 million, debt service just under 5 million, and then capital projects. We are currently asking, as we have in previous years, to put a dime or 10 cents of our tax levy directly to capital projects. That keeps our fund transfers down. And it also allows us to build a bit of a fund balance in the capital projects fund. And I've been building that incrementally over time. And the budget I'll show you this evening has about an ending balance of about $500,000, which is good. Okay, our state funding is composed of the Classroom Trust Fund, or Prop C, and our basic formula, which is based on our average daily attendance. Weighted average daily attendance corrects for students with IEPs. These are the numbers that we expect on the Classroom Trust Fund, just a modest increase there. Of course, these are subject to change as we get better information from the state. And then on basic formula, the weighted ADA per weighted ADA is 1,635. No increase to the state adequacy target, excuse me. So we're estimating about a $1.6 million basic formula payment for the next fiscal year. Federal funding should be somewhere around that $600,000 mark. Of course, it was significantly high, which you'll see it skews the numbers as we review the next budget, as well as the historical from the ESSER funds and the various grants that were related to the pandemic and our recovery from it. Okay, so this is all funds. Now, this is inclusive of, this is our revenues. So here's our revenues. You'll see exactly what I was talking about. We are losing about $1.4 million in federal funding, and that's planned and anticipated. And about $750,000 in other federal funding. Just a graphical look of how our revenues have been trending over time. Okay, so as we get into the expense side, we'll start with positions. So due to increased enrollment and org chart changes, we're adding 9 FTE. Some of these will be delayed. For the most part, the new square footage at the high school, middle school will not be coming online until the next school year. So as more square footage is added, we will need to add more support staff, which is why we need additional custodian positions here. We're also adding that attendance secretary, which is much needed for the middle school and high school to share. The cook's assistant, we may pause on this, just full disclosure, as we're working through the food management companies. We likely won't take on any additional food service employees, so this one may not be realized. Okay, salaries. This has actually changed a little bit as Roxanne has done what she does, and somehow gets us pretty darn close to break even most years on the ins and the outs as far as those resigning and those coming in. All those changes, including the org chart and also movement on the salary schedule and planned increases to our support staff and administrator salaries, we are about a 3.6% increase in salaries between this year and next year. We've also made spot increases to select positions to get them closer to the median in the region. Benefits, we'll realize a 5.3 increase in our medical insurance premiums due to us being in Tier 5 with the CSD Insurance Trust. This is an item that the Compensation and Benefits Task Force will be taking a look at as we come into the next year as they begin their work in the fall. One of the things that they've identified as an area of study, potential study that is the area of benefits, and if there's any way that we can find to curb those rising costs. All in all, benefits, which includes retirement and medical insurances, is increasing about 6.3% for fiscal 23. Purchase services decreases and supplies decreases. These budgets in particular have been propped up by that federal funding that we've discussed. So as some of those items are being pulled out, that's a large part of this. Also, we have removed some of the curriculum writing courses that we've had over the past years. Some of those have fallen away. Also, consultants, reducing consultant will reduce that purchase service cost quite a lot. Okay, on capital outlay or capital projects, we've talked about these as well. These have not changed. We will be adding some interactive boards. We're seeking quotes for the crack ceiling and restriping parking lot. That's a lot cheaper than it is to replace a parking lot. So we're going to try and get some maintenance that we've deferred and hope that we've not waited too long and can get a few more years out of that parking lot over there at the ECC. Of course, it's time for the elementary teacher and staff laptop refresh, as well as some much needed work to the sidewalks and curbs out on the Glade Circle. Middle school, we've added 2 classrooms that will be coming online at the start of the school year, and some other moves that we can talk about later in other meetings. High school, Project Lead the Way, as it continues to ramp up, its trajectory is set, but it's a 5-year progression, I believe, as we're ramping into that program. And we are adding some musical instruments to our band program. The Student Success Center does need some maintenance and some safety measures, such as the concrete steps and stoop need replaced and a handrail, and the interior needs repainted. And while the future of the Success Center is not yet determined, regardless, these repairs would have to be made, whichever direction the board decides to go with that. Okay, you know that the HVAC problem, we've discussed that at length at the high school, middle school. As a matter of fact, Manny tells me that we've got 3 out currently. And luckily the building is mostly a construction site, so we're not too concerned about that right now. However, with this heat, it could be a problem if we had students and more staff in the building. So I'm anxiously awaiting some additional information from JCI on what this repair and replace could look like. If that does not happen this year, then we do have budget to replace those as they die. Theaters in needs of some facelifts as well as some technology upgrades. And then we're replacing the iMacs on all of our building secretary and registrar desks. $4.6 million in debt, which also means we're paying down $4.6 million in debt. So less debt's always good. So these numbers are extraordinarily large in comparison to what our operations budget is, and that's because I have the bond funds built into this. I usually pull those out, but since this is the full budget, I thought I'd show you what that looks like. We're budgeting to spend about $13.9 million on capital, which is the lion's share of that is, of course, our construction projects from Prop E. And then that leaves about a little over 12 million for the high school, middle school project to finish up over the course of the next 15, 18 months or so. Okay, here's the one that you've all been waiting for. These are our operating funds. And this is what they look like. So right now for 22, with the budget that I have currently in place, it's 43% fund balance. That will shift later in the next meeting. We'll talk about a budget amendment. You'll see what that number will become once we apply those, post those changes, with a 34.4% fund balance in fiscal 23. So you see that's about a $1.9 million decrease to the fund balance as we've been planning. And of course, you'll notice that everything is flat on the revenue side from 23 forward. We do increase benefits and salaries by a percentage, purchase service supplies, capital outlay. I do increase those for 1 year on the capital outlay side. So everything being flat, this is where things would land. So between 24 and 25 is the target area where we would need to be thinking. We would need to be thinking in fiscal 24 about what our next steps would be. Of course, I'll always paint you the worst picture possible. So, all right. So budget season, while I enjoy it, it is grueling. It is a marathon. It's exhausting. You may hear that and see that in my eyes. So we are still making final edits to the budget document. It was pitching me fits about 5 o'clock tonight. It was in a bit of a panic, but we got it worked out. So I will present for you the final budget for approval, which is tonight, or excuse me, at the next meeting, and then we'll open the new budget year on July 1. So I do want to share just a few items in the budget book, not because I'm proud of it or anything, just because there's a couple of important pages in there. It's like 97 pages. So I'll let you peruse that on your own in digital format. If you'd like a printed copy, just shoot me an email or a text and I'll run one off for you. Any questions or discussion as it relates to the numbers that I've just shown you in this presentation?
Chris, I just want to thank you for your time and effort on the budget. I've, of course, watched you build it, labor with it, work with the team to ensure that the numbers were appropriate. So much appreciated, and looking forward to working through some of the other pieces that we've been discussing.
Well, thank you very much. This is, I feel, one of the, if not the most important aspects of this position. And it's important. So I will always give it its due diligence. Okay, I'm going to switch share to, actually, I might just be able to switch tabs here. Let me see if I can get this full screen. No, but I will make it larger. You can see this, right? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to not make you motion sick by scrolling real fast. But let's see what page I'm on here. For those of you that are new to this process, I will just hit some highlights here. I'm going to go slow so you don't get motion sick. That's a thing. The contents, the table of contents here is live links. So I believe they also work in the PDF. So if you wanted to zip to high school budgets, you can just zip yourself right there, which is fantastic. And you can see we still have just a few typos to clean up. Ignore that. So, I will take you through the budget directive, as well as revenue outlook forecast, the expenditure forecast, why we are spending the things that why we're spending the dollars that we do, the enrollment projection, which looks to be sort of tapering off here, luckily. Not that we don't want any more children, but we've got a lot of children. And of course, that's been a challenge for us space-wise. And then, so this is, the first section is just about the budget message, then the financial outlook. And to speak to that, we do know that we are in a very challenging financial and economic environment right now. I don't see that changing anytime in the near future, but I am hopeful that we will pull out of whatever it is that, whatever funk our economy is in right now, we will pull out of that and MRH will remain strong. Then I'll take you through the building. I take you through all of the building and department budgets where you can see the over and the under from the years prior. Of course, the math here is only done between 22 and 23. Then we'll get you to the fund balance summary. This is if you pay attention to a couple of things, just a couple of things, let this be one of them. This is the fund balance summary and how everything is broken down from the general fund, teachers fund, and debt service and capital projects. And then a total of all funds. So this gives you about the highest look that I can possibly give you of what our budgets look like by fund over time. And then I'm really excited that I was able to finally get this document linked into this document. This is what you've already seen. I just changed the colors to make them a little bit more visually pleasing. And I take you through the revenues. And then we hit the expenses. I hit the expenses at two levels, much like we do in our financial statements. I'll hit it at the function level, and then I'll hit it at the object level, which goes just a little bit deeper. Now, this is the budget. This is what you'll be approving. This piece right here. This is like the important part. This is what shows you exactly the categories that all of our revenue and all of our expenses are coming from, and then what they are totaled, along with our beginning and ending fund balance for each of the funds. So the general fund, Fund 1, the teachers fund, Fund 2, and we have the debt service fund, followed by, I think I've got the capital projects fund in there, and then COPS. And you see bond issue I've got down here at 0. We'll probably not have expended all of that because we'll have retainage and some cleanup items to do. But this is about where we should land. We're typically pretty close on our forecasting. So I expect this to be, for the most part, roundabout where we'll add. The transfers in and out, if you are wondering about, these are big numbers. We pay the teachers fund, which is this fund here, from the general fund. We only put as many dollars in the teacher fund as we need to, because that is a restricted fund. So once funds are in there, we can't take them out for anything other than certificated salaries and benefits. So we like to keep that at 0 whenever possible. And then you can see here what I was talking about with the capital projects fund, how that we're slowly building a fund balance there on capital projects. And then everything else, I take you through the property taxes. Historically, what our assessed valuation, along with our TIFs, and what those numbers have been over time. Take you through our historical tax rates. And then how we split those up amongst the different funds. Our collection rates. And the revenue resulting from that. And we go through all the sales tax stuff, tell you what the state foundation formula is, the wonderful state foundation formula equation. Then what our state budgets have looked like over time, our revenues have looked like over time, excuse me. Then we get into revenue, breaking it all down. By fund. Then we hit expenses. So again, by function. By fund. I'm still working on this. I don't know why this is there. I apologize for that. I couldn't fix it. I'll figure it out though. Then we go, this says by function, that is by object. And we don't need to go through all that. So lots of numbers. Then I give you departmental detail. I've got some summary stuff down here too. Lots of numbers. There will be a quiz at the end of the meeting. Okay, then positions. Shows you a little bit how positions are changing. Just as a note, because of the food service management company, we are planning to not fill some of those positions. So if you see the numbers moving around in that regard, that is why. Oops, not on the screen. All right, and the last thing is, well, second to last thing is our debt schedule over time. So you can see the next couple of years are big. We won't start declining notably until 29 or 30, unless we do something different between now and then. And then our cohort survival chart, which tries to predict what our cohort sizes will be over time. And note here, the 2021, we did experience quite a bit of a dip in a lot of our cohorts as related to the pandemic. Okay, so that's just a quick tour of the book. I'll let you dig into that at your leisure, and just hit me with any questions that you have between now and whenever we meet to approve the final budget. Which brings me to my final point of conversation, which is we need to select a date for the final budget approval. So we like to do that as close to the end of the month as possible, because I'm also going to bring you a final budget amendment for fiscal 22. And I will post that budget earlier in that day so that I can have a true look from 22 to 23. So looking at the calendar, that would be the week of the 27th. We've traditionally done that Tuesday before the last day of the month, which in this case would make it June 28th. If you wouldn't mind checking your calendars for availability to see if we would at least have quorum for a final budget approval on the 28th.
Works for me.
Works for me.
Same for me.
It would be a virtual meeting that lasts about 15 minutes, right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anybody it does not work for? Okay, so the 28th.
28th, 6:15, 6:30, 6. So your call.
Everybody okay with 6:15? Okay, 6:15.
Perfect. And I'll try and have you out of there in 15, 20 minutes. Okay, well, thank you all very much for the opportunity to share all this. I know it sometimes is a little overwhelming. Trust me, I know. But I do feel it's a strong budget, and we will make some slight edits between now and the next time, which is primarily what our points of conversation will be when we meet that final time. So,
Does anybody have any questions for Chris right now?
No questions, just thank you for your hard work. It's very
Yeah.
digestible. Thank you.
I have a couple questions if we have time.
We do.
Chris, just thinking about your comments about inflation and interest rates. Can you tell us how you built that into this budget? I'm not really seeing specific places where I would expect to find that.
the aspect of the budget that I'm most concerned with is our utilities costs as it relates to energy increases. So I have added significantly to those budgets to account for that. As far as the inflationary impacts, I haven't seen a lot on goods and services yet. For the most part, like for instance, our construction projects, we're under contract. The price they gave us is the price that we get. So unless we make changes, which is part of the problem with change orders, is one thing about change orders, you always get them, but they are they're priced at today's pricing, not the pricing we had a year and a half ago. So that's always a challenge. But no, I do feel like this budget will hold and account. We've gotten good quotes. Like for our technology, I've shown you those. Those are our big expenses, and honestly, those prices just haven't shifted all that much.
And for interest?
Interest doesn't really impact us. Actually, it positively impacts us as interest rates rise because we do have a lot of money in the bank, which we'll talk about in the coming months as I try and extract as much value out of those dollars as possible with MOSIP and which is our investment, the investment company that we use through the state. But yeah, it was actually pretty hard over the last couple of years with interest being so low. We weren't making hardly any money at all. And now that they start going up, it's sort of a double-edged sword though, Annie, because while we make a little bit more on the money we have in the bank, money also costs more. So that is something to think about.
Right? If we want to borrow more, it would cost more, but our existing debt service is still at those lower historical rates. Is that
Yes, ma'am.
accurate?
Those are locked in just like your home mortgage would be.
Mhm. And then as far as the inflationary pressures on home values, I didn't see any increases on the revenue side, but theoretically it might be some upside there too.
We won't really see any impacts on that until the next reassessment year.
Okay.
With so we're coming into fiscal 20. This is confusing. So we're coming into fiscal 23, which is tax year 22, which is a year of non-assessment. Every even numbered tax year is a non-assessment year. So that means every odd numbered tax year is a reassessment year. So in that book, you'll see what how the values have changed over time. I don't yet have a prediction on what that reassessment will look like. It'll be interesting to see if it scales to inflation or if the county tries to keep it a little more flat than they have in the past. We'll see.
So I guess maybe what would be helpful for me in a final document would be, here are some risks on those three items, and here's what's in the budget, and here are some additional variations we might see relative to the budget in these categories. That would be what I would appreciate seeing. So
variations as in making different choices as the budget's progressing through the year, or?
No, just like, you're going to give your best guess, right? It's a very volatile environment. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen, but I'd like to see, here's the assumptions that I have when I put this together, and here's how actual results might vary from that.
Okay, so potential outcomes as they relate to those assumptions. Sure. And I touch on that a little bit in my message in the book, but I will flesh that out a little bit more for you. That's a fair That's a fair ask.
Thanks, Chris.
Does
Good
anybody
questions.
else have any questions?
I'm chewing on some questions. I'll probably put them in writing. And again, I know these are like small slivers of the budget, but have some questions about the food service changes and just, again, the impact of the past year of the federal funding to support, school lunches and breakfasts. Obviously, we haven't been, utilizing our community's resources on that. Just wondering about how that may impact the uptake of purchasing lunches, this coming school year, plus the change in, the provider. And then I do have some questions, and I think it's a little bit programmatic to connected to both Discover Club and preschool, and possibly even parents as teachers, as far as how those are generating revenue, but also may need, I will put this in writing because I just have some questions about what numbers we're budgeting on right now, how our hiring is, being impacted in those spaces. And, again, I know we have both made decisions historically to put in a certain amount of district resources into some of those programs, and that others of those programs are more self-sustaining, and I think just need to maybe pull out that conversation again. So that's a preview of my questions to come.
Sure.
I'm not
And-
expecting any answers right now because I didn't give you any solid questions.
Well, I understand the spirit of those questions very much, and those are all very relevant. Our local revenue, in addition to our tax revenue, is exactly the programmatic revenue that you just outlined there. And food service, actually, we got today was the sealed bid opening for our food management company. So I have those numbers, but I can't talk about them yet. I don't yet know how those numbers will impact our budget. So we have to take the cost plus the fee and do all the math and figure out what that's going to look like for us. I think this year we're transferring about $230,000 into Fund 5, which is where we hold food service. So you're right, we do take a bit of a hit on that one. It will be interesting to see as I go through these proposals how much time it takes to get us back to neutral. Equilibrium would be awesome when it comes to that. So a lot of the districts that work with these companies are able to get there over time, but it is a process. And as far as the revenue for Discover Club, we do have some changes that we'll be talking to you about in the future with as it relates to that. And then also with preschool, I'm just budgeting pretty much what we've budgeted for this year. And even though I know that we took a bit of a hit this year because of refunds due to COVID and quarantines and such. So those will all be reflected in the numbers. I'll look forward to your questions.
And again, I acknowledge that, we have to be good stewards of every dollar, but these are, a very small portion of revenue and expenditures.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions or comments? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? See you guys in about 9 minutes. And there is a new link. Is that right, Chris? Okay. Thank you. See you guys shortly.